Welcome to another episode of the Unfiltered Nonprofit Podcast. I'm Cherry Chen, your nonprofit CFO, and I'm thrilled to have you join me on this journey. This podcast dives into the real world of nonprofit leadership, sharing inspiring stories, experiences, and the truth about what it takes to operate a nonprofit successfully. Think of this as your mastermind session on the go. Now, without further ado, please welcome today's nonprofit leader. Hi everyone, welcome to the Unfiltered Nonprofit. I'm Cherry Chen. I'm very excited today to introduce our guest, Steven Heckbert from the Canadian Pork Council. You're the executive director there.
I am. Thank you for having me. It's going to be a great chat, I hope, and thanks for having me. Apologies in advance for the voice. I don't normally sound this husky, but this is the voice you're going to get today. So,
well, I hope you feel better after this.
Well, let's hope. Although apparently you also have a bit of a cold at this moment, so let's see if we both recover in a timely and hopefully healthy way.
Yeah. So, a few years ago, you were not an association or a nonprofit leader. The reason why I got introduced to you was because of your jokes. I mean, no, it's because of how you teach. And I heard that you are a great professor. You were a great professor.
Well, I mean, you're always a teacher. I will say that. Everyone is a teacher. Now, sometimes the lessons are less helpful, but everyone's a teacher. No, I did teach. I taught one of your staff at Algonquin College. In fact, I think I may have taught two of the staffers over time at Algonquin. But yeah, I did that for 15 years. It was a great job. I always sort of knew it would be a 15-year job. It's a very caring profession, and I think you have to recognize when you think you've run your compassion to its extent. I think you have to also recognize that you still need that, and if you don't feel you have as much as you once did, you probably are best to go do something different at this moment. And so while I feel compassion for pork producers, for sure, it's just different. They're not the same as young people who are, often, frankly, scared about the future, right? They're coming in and they're a little bit nervous about what's going to happen to them in the future. So you really have to help, and you have to be placed and understand what they're going through as you work with them.
So what was your background from? Oh, what were you teaching?
I taught public relations, public affairs. So I was also a consultant the whole time as well. So I would have consulting clients just to sort of make sure I kept my hand in the industry and saw the changes that were happening. I mean, if you think about communications, when I started in communications, right, the whole business was still fairly media relations, right? Like media had an enormous role. You had a lot of different mechanisms, right? Advertising mattered. When I was younger and I ran an advertising agency.
Oh, cool.
Like it was just an entirely different thing, right? Like ads mattered, and you had basically three platforms, right? It was radio, television, and news and print. And so, that no longer is true. You no longer just have three platforms. You have multiple platforms. You've got all sorts of, so the changes that I've seen just in my life, significant in terms of how we communicate, what you have to think about. And more importantly, I would say one of the things that I think is probably great about today's world is just the democratization of it, right? Like, so now you can basically create your own platform, right? You have some tools, but like if you've got a YouTube account that, suddenly someone finds you and subscribes, it's just an entirely different model than it would have been. We have a lot more freedom, but we also have, frankly, and I will say this, I think we have more responsibility as communicators. And Absolutely. I don't know that communicators always accept the responsibility that comes with the new tools.
100% no, not everyone. That's the true statement.
Yes.
Yeah. People have their own agenda, right?
Yeah.
So it's such a challenging topic. So how did your public relations teaching help you transition to the role in Canadian Pork Council?
So great question, but I think, basically I think there's probably three things where it was sort of super helpful. One is that you're never in any association role, communications is now job one. whether that's communicating with your members, so whether it's an internal communications function, communicating with your members, in my case, communicating with my provincial pork organizations and through them producers, communicating to government, communicating with government, communicating to consumers, communicating with consumers. So the audiences are so complicated now, and you have to be consistent in your messaging, and you also have to understand people aren't paying attention to you. They really aren't. Like, this is the number one challenge I would say that I consistently try to sort of tell people is people have their own stuff going on.
Yeah.
They have their own lives. They're not thinking about us. They're not thinking about
You're talking marketing term now.
like they have, right, like they've got to get the kids to soccer practice, or they have, an aging parent. In particular, if you think about the squeeze that the average consumer is going through today, right? Like, their parents are getting older, they've got their own families. Like, it's just getting them to pay any attention to you it requires that you meet them where they live. You don't expect them to come to where they live, where you are. So I would say that's job one, is just the terms of the simplicity and understanding how important communication is, and how important it is to simplify your messages. So I think that's one thing. I think the second thing that I think being a professor was helpful is just how crucial teamwork is, and how crucial you really have to build strong teams and help people understand what it means to be a good teammate. I actually think we probably overvalue leadership training and undervalue teammate training. And by that, I mean, everybody's a leader. Everybody is always a leader, whether you're, because every team will need that person to step up and lead, maybe if it's only for a minute. Yeah. But there's, as you build any project, as you do anything, someone on that team is going to be the crucial piece at some point in time. And you have to know to defer to them in that moment. And you also have to know how to sort of, all work together. So I think, the ability to build and talk about being a great teammate, and whether that's in a supervisory role or it's in a support role. But like, we just went through 3 days of meetings, right? And our executive assistant, right, who's been with us 20 years, frankly, we couldn't do it without her. Like, and so at that moment, she's the lead, right? Yeah. And obviously, there's lots of people who would say, oh, she's just the executive assistant. Well, I got to tell you, the last 3 days, she's been the team lead, right? Like, it's her show. And I'm happy to support her in that role, right? Like, it's really, like, all I can do is interfere and get in the way if I start to try to throw my weight around. Yes. So that's, I would say sort of teamwork. And I think the third thing where being a professor has been super helpful is just understanding that everyone's an individual. One of the things that I will say that's changed in education, and I actually think I was pretty good at managing the change, although Zoe may disagree. But, when I started, I think I probably thought there was one program for students. By the time I was done, I understood that if there was 57 students in the class, there were 57 programs. And so you have to design a program to individualize for each student based on their needs, based on their skill set, and also based on their desires and ambitions, right? And some people, may not understand what their ambition is today, but you need to help them be ready for when that moment comes to them. And so you really have to personalize, and frankly, this is true in marketing today. It's true in every aspect. You have to personalize every experience. And so, I would say having that background has been super helpful, because obviously every producer has their own individual story. Every provincial association has their story and their priorities. Some of them don't have as many members as some of the others. So it's really about understanding, look, we live in a world where everybody's got a slightly different situation that they're facing. And if you can't have some compassion and some relatability to what they're going through, they're not going to listen to you. You have to listen to them before they're prepared to listen to you.
100%. Like, I think that's a textbook on its own, what you just went through.
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay, coming back to your role at Canadian Pork Council, you must have done a lot of public relations work.
Do a lot of public relations work, a lot of public affairs work, which is slightly different. So we are obviously an advocacy organization. So we talk to governments, federal, provincial, international.
Do you feed them pork all the time?
I try to feed them pork all the time. It is the most underrated protein for sure. Although I think everyone loves bacon. So I actually think it's probably the easiest sale on
I
that.
was thinking exactly about that this morning when I was eating the bacon here.
Yeah, we find bacon to be actually the starter protein for a lot of people. You know, a lot of people are like, "Oh, I'm thinking about becoming a vegetarian, except for bacon." So like it really is. It's a challenge to try to live without it, and it's delicious in every form. So yeah, we try to showcase sort of the benefits of pork, and again, it's right like it's I represent producers, so our folks are really from farm to to processor,
Yep.
right? And then we have a processor group of partners who talk about it really from that from that transport moment to table. So it's about building that partnership as well, right? So we're by and large not really necessarily in touch with consumers, but consumers need to have faith that the producers are doing and producing high quality protein, but also high quality taking care of the animals, making sure that everything is safe, secure, and food security is obviously becoming an ever more increasing issue. So we've got a lot of things to talk about with a lot of different audiences, and it's about keeping all those balls advancing all at the same time. So we have, the funny part is pork is frankly one of the least, sort of known industries in Canada. We're an $11.2 billion contributor on GDP.
Wow.
We sell $5 billion of pork around the world.
So out of the 11.2, 5 was so around
Actually, well, 11.2 is our economic impact. So that's our contribution to GDP. But we have about $8 billion in direct sales of our pork products, and then there's further processing, et cetera. But so of the 8 billion, 5 billion goes around the world.
Wow.
And we're the second largest seller in Japan in terms of pork products. We have basically a multi-billion-dollar trade with the United States every year. So it's an economic powerhouse. We employ over 100,000 people across the country, and a lot in rural Canada. And so that's one of the other challenges, right? Is that most of our folks live in rural communities, and their contribution is outsized in rural communities because there's lots of communities in Canada that if it weren't for the pork industry, they would cease existing.
Now, so what would you say you're the most, what would you say you are most proud of for accomplishing in terms of your tenure, like the 2 years that you are with Canadian Pork Council? What's the proudest project that you have?
So I would say there's two things that I'm pretty proud of. So one is when I was hired for two things: to increase our visibility in Ottawa, and I think we've done a very good job at that. I think we just had a lobby day on Tuesday. We had over 30 meetings with elected officials and senators, and really had great conversations with them about what's happening in pork right now. We have 3 events now annually where we do that. We do one in fall, one in spring, and then we do a Rib Fest event on Spark Street. It's going to sound funny. Prior to my arrival, there was a Rib Fest every year on Spark Street. And they sell pork ribs. But prior to my arrival, we'd never done a partnership with Rib Fest. We just hadn't. I don't know how we missed it, but literally, they sell our product right there on Spark Street, where all of the sort of parliamentarians have their offices. And so we started doing an event at Rib Fest, and so this year we had 250 attendees at our Rib Fest event, and people love ribs. I mean, next to bacon, I think ribs are probably pretty close.
That's also my favorite.
Yeah, ribs. I love ribs. So I think just in terms of increasing our visibility with parliamentarians and sort of being a voice that they want to turn to and have conversations with, I think that's one thing that I take some particular pride in. I think the second thing is our continuing engagement with government on our biggest issue, which is African swine fever. So African swine fever is not yet in Canada, but should it come to Canada, it'll be a devastating blow. It's basically will be a disaster for the pork industry. So we're really working hard on prep on that. We've done some great work with government, and just that ongoing relationship and helping government understand, our role in helping to prep for it. And the funny, if I was given advice to anyone, and I think that's part of what we're going to try to do here. We often, as associations, will talk with government, and we'll sort of ask them for things. And one of the things that I think we've tried to do well is to say thank you. So when government has done something that we've asked them to do, or when they've partnered with us and they've done good work, my number one priority has been to try to sort of say to them, thank you. Thank you for doing that. Like thank you for listening to us, and thank you for agreeing to sort of help us with that. Because too often, right, we're on to the next thing right away. Well, they're people too, right? Like people who work in government, and whatever your opinion of politicians or public servants in any way, shape, or form, they're people too. They work hard. They want to do a good job. They want to sort of be recognized for doing a good job. And I don't think we say thank you enough. I frankly think we probably don't say thank you enough in general in the world. But I think it's important for us to remember, if somebody has done, what you've asked them to do, it doesn't, you don't sort of go on to the next thing right away. Just sort of say, look, thank you for hearing me. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for helping us. And it costs you nothing to say thank you.
Absolutely. Hello, Unfiltered Nonprofit listeners. It's Cherry Chen here, your host and the CEO of Otis Financial Solutions. Let's talk about something that can be a major headache for many nonprofits: managing your finances. Are you feeling overwhelmed by budgeting, financial reports, or keeping up with compliance? You're not alone. Many nonprofit leaders struggle with these issues too, but you don't have to. At Otis Financial Solutions, we specialize in making financial management easy for nonprofit leaders and associations leaders. For over 18 years, we've been turning financial stress into peace of mind. Our services are designed to meet your unique needs, from day-to-day bookkeeping to strategic financial planning. Imagine having more time to focus on your mission, knowing that your finances are in experts' hands. If that sounds like something you need, I'm offering a no obligation 20-minute consultation. Let's discuss your challenges and explore how Otis can help you achieve your goals. Visit nonprofitcfo.ca to book your call today. Let's simplify your financial management together. And we're now recording in the event, the CSAE event, and this year's theme is about connection. So that is part of forming the connection. I think one of my favorite book is called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And saying thank you is such a basic thing. And speaking of which, earlier today we talked about building relationship and talk about your family, and your son got a job.
Yeah, he did. First job at a university. It was pretty great. He came home and he said, well, I'm thinking about getting a job. He actually, in the long run, he wants to do a different thing. So he sort of asked me for my advice, and I said, well, you should call this person. And it was a pretty quick move, right? He called that person, went to see them. As he was leaving their office, they had referred him to someone else. He went to talk to that person, and that person immediately called a different office, and he's working now for a fairly senior official in Canada. And look, I mean, I think it's relative for a couple of reasons. I think people often assume that there's talent scouts out there looking for you.
Yep.
There are no talent scouts. I used to say this in school all the time. Like you are now in charge of your own life, and you have to understand, whether you call it personal branding or whatever you call it, but you are in charge of your own life, and you will only create opportunities for yourself if you understand that no one's waiting for you to show up. You have to show up, and you have to be out there and put yourself out there. So I would say that I think that's a lesson he learned, hopefully from me, but from other people in his life as well. And so I'm super proud of him for, getting out there right away. And, he didn't need much nudging. I mean, he works super hard right now. He's probably working 80 hours a week. And frankly, that experience alone is going to stand him in good stead, right? He, 100%. There's two things I can't teach. I always told people there's two things I can't teach: attitude and work ethic. And if you've got both of those, you're hired. You're hired in today's world, right? And you're probably going to get promoted pretty quickly, because if your attitude is positive and you understand, it's not always and I work for farmers and I love farmers, right? But farmers sometimes are dissatisfied if they get 85% of what they're looking for. Well, that's an A+. 85% is an A+. And nobody ever gets 100%. And so it's important to sort of manage your expectations, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think that's an important thing that that he's learned already. And he's 23. My other guy is 25, and I think he's learned similar lessons, right?
Yeah.
And from my perspective, I think the fact that they don't live at home, and they're out, they're launched, they're on their own. I think, frankly, my job as a parent, well, never done, but I've done what it was I'm supposed to do from a societal perspective.
Absolutely, 100%. Because I'm also an employer out there. I've seen so many people also complaining about hiring millennial and not getting anything out of them.
Again, I will, and I've heard this too, and I will say, so this is where I will often, and I did a lot of work with employers when I was a professor. And one of the things that's difficult is we have our own lived experience about when we entered the workforce, and we all sort of can sometimes fail to recognize that it never occurred to me that the picture I took of myself at 17 would have an impact on my life at 27. First of all, I didn't share it with anybody.
Yeah.
And so it wouldn't have occurred to me that there was going to be decisions that I made that would haunt me. So for young people today, the reason for the anxiety and the reason for that is because decisions they will have made when they were younger can come back to haunt them because they've documented it.
Yeah.
So the number one thing I always try to tell my students was maybe a little less with the documentation of everything you've ever done. Maybe, if you're at that
So
party,
true.
you don't need to take pictures of everything. Maybe fewer bathroom selfies.
Yeah.
And so there's that. But the other thing is that like the pressure that creates on you, right? I mean, I think it's well known, and I'm not revealing anything. Social media causes anxiety. The number one thing we could do, frankly, for young people is just eliminate the tools, like just sort of say, look, and frankly, I think the other thing we could do is say to social media companies, you have to eliminate all their data as soon as they turn 18. As soon as they turn 18, make them create a new account, eliminate everything from before, because you can't have that. You can't own that data. They could not sign a contract.
Yeah.
And I think social media companies should be held accountable for making sure that there's a magic age. If you want to let people on before they turn 18, you've got to commit that you're going to erase their data and you're going to erase their presence from when they were pre-18. I also think, and look, I'm guilty of it. I didn't sort of stop my kids from having their profiles. But boy, I'll tell you, Bill Gates didn't have his kids on online, and Mark Zuckerberg didn't either. So that should tell you that as a parent, you have a responsibility. You're not their friends. You're not their friends. And you have a responsibility to make sure what they're doing online. And that means, like, have their login. Every once in a while, just log in and check.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. My kids are not online at all.
Yeah. I think that's wise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they are one of the most behaving kids in the block.
Yeah.
But then sometimes you're seeing their friends are playing video games, and they never complain. So far I'm still good.
Yeah.
And I can
So far you're
still,
still good.
yes,
Right. Exactly.
yes,
Yeah.
keep them off. So that is one of the biggest thing that we did we're doing as parents to keep them off online.
Yeah. The longer you do that, the better off they'll be.
Yeah. I'm surprised. Okay, so I don't want to keep you all day long, and I want to respect your time. I want to ask you one final question. What's the most challenging part of your career? What have you experienced, and how did you overcome that?
So I probably have two examples here, largely because I never sort of have just one. You may have noticed I always answer in either two or threes.
Yeah.
It's a PR trick. It just means I'm never held accountable to any one thing. I would say there's been two things that I would say. When I was younger, I once made a decision that I wanted to work as a political staffer. I wanted to work as a political staffer. And so I did that for a little bit, and then the minister I was working for got shuffled over to Citizenship and Immigration Canada in 2005.
Yeah.
And at the time, and in fact, it was a little bit like today, but probably today, actually, I will say, I think is much less than that. But in 2005, Canada, the Toronto Star had a headline on the day we got shuffled over, which is Canada is accepting too many refugees, official. And like it had turned very anti-New Canadian. It was there's too many, we have to stop. There's no, and so the minister asked me, called me and said, so I'm getting shuffled over. Will you come with me? And I said, yes. And I said, and he said, so what do you think we need to do? And I said, I think we need to move immigration from this social pages, from a social issue to an economic issue, because that's what it is. I said, so I think we need to stop talking about all the things that are wrong, and we need to start talking about the things that are right. So we need to sort of make sure we, emphasize the things that work in immigration. We moved the stories from, the political pages to the business pages. And it was a very deliberate effort to make sure that we talked again about, here's why new Canadians are such a benefit to us. Here's why we really need to think about this. Our demographics are challenging. We have all sorts of needs in terms of the labor market. And we also just have a need to sort of, we're a diverse country, and so we need to embrace that diversity, and we're not going to do it. We're not going to be successful. We're not going to be a successful middle power if we don't understand the value of those diasporas that come to Canada, but also make sure that we understand how to build those trading relationships as a result. So when we left, the day we were called the election, the Toronto Star headline was Canada to accept 400,000 immigrants by 2007. And it was not an election issue. And when we started, there were problems with immigration and refugee boards. All people were talking about what was wrong with immigration. And in 12 months, we shifted to what was right about it.
That's a successful project.
And and it wasn't like we had a mandate from anyone to do it. We just knew that we had to. That's how we had to do it. So I think that was a success, and I credit the minister for having sort of the ability to stay focused on that. But that really was about simplicity and consistency
in communication.
Yeah, just communication. Just simplify your messages and be consistent in those messages. You can't answer every single detail. You can't get bogged down in, like, I'm going to talk about the number of provincial nominee program accepted in Prince Edward Island. Like I'm losing the thread, right? So I was always like, no, we have to bring it back all the time to. And storytelling, like we had lots of great stories to tell. So it was always about making sure we're telling those stories and making sure we have that. And it's super challenging, right? Because everybody wants to be an expert.
Yeah.
But the more you're an expert in something, the easier it should be for you to explain it. And you really have to think about your audience. When you want to have an expertise in something, your audience needs to just trust that you have that expertise. They don't need all the details that say that you know it. They simply do not care. They don't have time to care. So you have to really simplify it. And it's your job to simplify your message and be consistent, because otherwise, I just don't have time. So I think that's one example. I think the second example I would use is like when I started at the college quite early on, program was in trouble, right? Like we were public relations, people were, it was the days when people were like, oh my God, we were called spin doctors. We were like, people felt bad about it. And so I had, I had a couple of parents, come in and ask me about, oh my God, is my child going to be able to get a job? Like what, people are saying mean things about communicators at the moment. And I said, here's the thing that I can tell you. Being a better communicator is never going to hurt you. Never going to hurt you. And I said, I can't see all of the future. But as we lose, and as we're going into personalization, and as we lose sort of what I would call the common threads, institutions, people have lost faith in institutions. People have lost faith in almost everything in our society. And part of the reason why they've lost faith is because we're not as open and direct and as clear and as accountable as we need to be. And the only way to do that is to improve your communication. You have got to understand that being more open, being more transparent is actually better for you. Hiding anything you'll get found out today, for sure. There's somebody's going to post on Reddit. It's going to get cross posted to Threads, which is then going to get cross posted to Snapchat, and suddenly you have a crisis in your hand and you didn't even see it coming. So it really is like it's you need a communicator at the table who's going to say to you all the time, we can't do that. And you should accept that challenge function. This is the other thing I try to tell business leaders all the time. You need someone who agreeably is disagreeable. You need someone at your table who says, are we sure? Are you 100% sure? Because too often we like having people who agree with us around the table.
100%.
And it's
Human nature.
human nature. And
Yeah.
you think to yourself, oh, let's all agree.
Yeah.
Right. In fact, frankly, like if I hear the word consensus one more time,
Yeah.
I think I'm going to throw up in my mouth.
Mm.
Like I don't actually want consensus all
Yeah.
the time. I want someone who's always going to be like,
Challenging.
I need a challenge function. I need someone who says, have you thought about? Because even when you're in the middle of something and you've chosen a path, I still want someone who says, circumstances have changed in the past 5 minutes. So we need that. We need a challenge function. And I would say if you're hiring today and you don't have that inside your organization today, that's the person you want to hire.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. In our organization, we conduct regular team meetings, and at the very beginning, it's really hard for my business partners to get out of their head. And when there are people raise their hands and say, don't agree with, like, say, in accounting firm, we do timesheets. So you need to enter timesheet. And one staff was particularly vocal about that and really going all out. And when people talk about things that they don't like, they tend to go in circle and circle and circle. Yeah. So it makes it bigger than it really is. And my leadership is very upset about it altogether. And I have to pull them back and said, like, she's voicing out because she cares. So we just have to change our narrative a little bit. And we need, though, frankly, we just like you said, we need those people so then we know where our blind spots are. Nothing worse
than everyone agreeing
Yeah.
and driving the bus into the ditch.
Exactly.
And that's what happens way too often. I see it all the time in business. Everyone agrees it's the right path, and no one looks at the circumstances externally and says, oh, hold on a second. The world changed. The world changed in the last, frankly, month.
Yep.
You know, and you have to be adaptable, and you've got to be flexible, right? And your people who are challenging you are among your most valuable resources. I basically tell staff, look, I could be wrong. Yep. I could be wrong.
Yep.
And it's your job to sort of say to me, you might be wrong.
Yep.
And having said that, I may also say that to them. Yep. It doesn't mean I don't think you're good at your job.
Yep.
You can be great at your job and still be wrong, because that is the nature of the world today, right?
It's also not the human nature, though, sadly.
No, what I want, confirmation bias is something you've got to watch all the time. 100%. Of course, I want someone to tell me, oh, no, things are going great, Steven. Yeah. I mean, and that's, look, everybody wants that. Yeah. But it's a very dangerous habit to get into, that you seek only the positive reinforcement, because then all of a sudden, you've never made mistakes. And I luckily make mistakes almost every day. But secondly, and so where I would say, the challenge for organizations is mistakes happen. Mm-hmm. They're supposed to happen. If they don't happen, you don't learn. Yep. But you need to have people have to have faith that those mistakes are going to be learning opportunities. They're not going to be fatal. Yep. As long as you have that kind of a culture, you'll be okay. That's fantastic. I feel like I just had this in this last, how long was it? 30, 40 minutes? I felt like we just had a lecture on communication. Sorry, that happens. Once a professor, always a professor. So, yeah. No, it is fantastic. It was, it actually provided a lot of validation to what I do on a regular basis, because primarily my role in the business is about marketing, and a lot of the communication and the tips that you share is really relevant even from an entrepreneur perspective. Yeah, and again, for entrepreneurs, this is the one thing, and I've done a lot of work with entrepreneurs, both in Saskatchewan and in New Brunswick, strangely, or Atlantic Canada. But the one thing as an entrepreneur you're gonna find exhausting is that your default is always to do the thing you like to do when you're an entrepreneur. Yeah. Which is great, except that you have to do the marketing. You've got to do the sales. You've got to do, right? So if you were an engineer and you had a great idea for a startup, you're going to have to stretch yourself. You're going to have to understand, no, I have to tell people about this great idea, and I have to be willing to sort of go out of my comfort zone. And more importantly than that, again, why it's important to build a strong team, people have to help you understand, I've got to push you out of your comfort zone. And everybody always wants to retreat to their comfort zone because it's nice and cozy, right? Like it's oh my God, I want the blanket around me. But you will not be successful if you're always in your comfort zone. And I can tell you, this is not my comfort zone. Like speaking on stage isn't my comfort zone. And yes, I 100% agree with you. It's hard to get out of that comfort zone and step and do outside and do something crazy. Well, you're doing a great job at it. So if this isn't in your comfort zone, I wouldn't have known that. So
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Stephen, for spending the last hour with us. And that was amazing. And I really learned a few things from you. So thank
Well,
you.
I'm glad if you learn one thing from me, that was a good productive use of my
Yeah.
time. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for having me, and always happy to chat about any number of things. So especially about why bacon is frankly the most delicious of all the things we can eat for
Yeah.
breakfast.
Yeah.
Sausage is also, by the way, super great, but just slightly different.
The bacon that I had this morning was awesome.
Excellent.
Yes. Thank you.
No problem.
As we wrap up, I want to share a bit more about what we do at Otis Financial Solutions. For the past 18 years, Otis Financial Solutions has been dedicated to enhancing the financial management and strategic planning capabilities of hundreds of associations and nonprofits across Canada. Our extensive experience has enabled us to deliver tailored financial solutions that drive growth and enhance sustainability for nonprofits and associations. If you are interested in learning more about how Otis Financial Solutions can support your organization, I would love to offer you a no obligation 20-minute call. Let's discuss your unique challenges and explore how we would be able to help you achieve your goals.